At my wedding, while I stood in a white dress smiling for photos, my parents were already packing for a trip with my sister. They hugged her tightly, whispered about airport times, and handed me a thin envelope like an afterthought. "Something small," my mother said softly. "More appropriate for you." Inside was a crumpled $2 lottery ticket. Guests laughed awkwardly. Someone joked about luck. I laughed too because crying would have ruined the pictures. My parents left early that night, choosing to travel with my sister instead of staying for my wedding. I watched their taillights disappear while my husband squeezed my hand, asking if I was okay. I said yes. I wasn't. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that this wasn't the last time that Ticke would matter. Because days later, that same joke of a gift turned into $100 million. And when my parents finally found out, I woke up to 99 missed calls, all from the people who taught me how invisible I was. The morning of my wedding started the way most brides imagine it should: soft sunlight through the hotel curtains, makeup brushes clicking open, my maid of honor adjusting the hem of my dress while music played low in the background. For a few quiet minutes, I let myself believe this day might finally be different. Then my phone buzzed. Not a congratulations text. Not "we're so proud of you." It was my mother. "We're running a little late. Rachel needed help packing." I stared at the message, my reflection blurred in the mirror. Packing? For what? When my parents arrived at the venue, it became painfully clear. My sister Rachel swept in ahead of them, glowing, designer sunglasses perched on her head, a brand new suitcase rolling behind her like a trophy. My father was already talking about flight times. My mother fussed over Rachel's hair, smoothing it down like she used to do for me years ago. "Oh, Emma," my mom said when she finally noticed me. "You look nice." Nice. Not beautiful, not radiant, just nice. Rachel hugged me quickly, careful not to wrinkle her outfit. "We're flying out tonight," she said brightly. "Mom and Dad decided to come with me. It's easier that way." "Tonight?" I repeated. "After the wedding?" My father shrugged, already checking his watch. "The tickets were cheaper, and your sister's been under a lot of stress." I almost laughed. Rachel, stressed? She hadn't lifted a finger for this wedding. She hadn't helped plan, decorate, or even RSVP on time. Meanwhile, I'd coordinated vendors, managed family drama, and paid for half the reception myself. But this wasn't new. This was just consistent. As guests began to arrive, I watched my parents move through the crowd, not toward me, but toward Rachel. They introduced her like she was the bride. "This is our daughter, Rachel," my mom beamed. "She's about to take a wonderful trip." And then, as if remembering something inconvenient, she turned to me. "Oh, and this is Emma, the bride." The ceremony itself passed in a blur. I focused on Michael, his steady voice, the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. That was the moment I clung to. That was the anchor that kept me upright. At the reception, speeches were made, toasts were raised, and then my parents stood up, tapping a glass. "We just want to say how proud we are of our girls," my father announced. Girls, plural, equal. That should have been my first warning. They handed Rachel a large envelope, laughing as she opened it. "A little something for your travels," my mom said. Inside were printed tickets, a luxury vacation. Applause filled the room. Then my mother turned to me and pressed a thin envelope into my hand, her smile tight, rehearsed. "This is for you, sweetheart." I opened it. A $2 lottery ticket. Someone chuckled. Someone else whispered, "Well, you never know." I forced a smile so wide my cheeks hurt. Cameras flashed. My parents kissed Rachel goodbye soon after, already talking about boarding times, already half gone. That night, after the last guest left and the lights dimmed, I stood in my wedding dress watching my parents walk out the door with my sister. And for the first time, I didn't feel surprised. I just felt empty. I had no idea that emptiness was about to be filled with something none of us saw coming. The reception ended the way most weddings do, chairs scraping softly against the floor, half-empty glasses abandoned on tables, the DJ packing up cables while humming under his breath. Guests hugged me, congratulated me again, told me how beautiful everything had been. Beautiful, successful, perfect. Words that floated around me without ever really landing. My parents didn't stay for the cleanup. They didn't stay for the last dance. They didn't even stay long enough to help gather the gifts. By the time Michael and I cut the cake, they were already gone on their way to the airport with Rachel, laughing about carry-on limits and window seats. I told myself not to look at my phone. I looked anyway. A photo from my mother popped up in the family group chat. Rachel stood between my parents at the terminal, her head resting on my father's shoulder, all three of them smiling wide for the camera. Family trip. My mother had captioned it, followed by a heart emoji. Michael saw my face change before I said anything. They left, didn't they? He asked gently. I nodded. He didn't say I'm sorry. He didn't need to. He just pulled me into his arms, and for the first time that day, I let my smile drop. Back in the hotel room later that night, the silence felt louder than the music ever had. My dress hung from the closet door, the white fabric catching the light like it belonged to someone else. I sat on the edge of the bed and kicked off my shoes, staring at the thin envelope my mother had given me. I'd slipped it into my purse without another look. Michael sat beside me. You don't have to talk about it, he said. Not tonight. I know. I hesitated. But if I don't say it now, I never will. I pulled out the envelope and handed it to him. He frowned slightly. What is it? Open it. He did. His expression shifted confusion first, then disbelief. A lottery ticket? He asked quietly. On our wedding day? I nodded. $2. Apparently that's what fits my situation. His jaw tightened. That's not a joke. That's cruel. I shrugged, though my chest ached. It's just how it's always been. That was the part that scared me most, not what they'd done, but how normal it felt. Growing up, I learned early not to expect much. Rachel got praise, attention, opportunities. I got reminders to be grateful, to be independent, to not make things difficult. When something good happened to me, it was luck. When something went wrong, it was my responsibility. Even tonight, on the one day that was supposed to be about me, they found a way to make it about her. Michael folded the ticket carefully and set it on the nightstand. Keep it, he said. Not because it's worth anything. Because it says more about them than it ever will about you. I nodded, but my throat felt tight. Later, when Michael fell asleep, I lay awake listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. We hope you understand. Rachel really needed this. You're strong, you always have been. I stared at the words until they blurred. You're strong. That was their favorite excuse. Strong meant I wouldn't complain. Strong meant I wouldn't ask. Strong meant they didn't have to choose me. I turned the phone face down and closed my eyes. The next morning, we left for a short honeymoon of our own, a quiet cabin a few hours away. Something we'd planned to keep simple. No luxury. No photos for social media. Just space. On the drive there, I found the lottery ticket again, tucked between receipts in my purse. I almost threw it away at a gas station, my hand hovering over the trash can. Then I stopped. Not because I believed in luck. I didn't. Life had taught me better than that, but because something in me, small, stubborn, and tired of being dismissed, wanted to keep it. 3 days later, back home, the house felt unusually quiet. I unpacked slowly, replaying the wedding in my head, wondering if I'd imagined some of the looks, the comments, the way my parents' eyes slid past me so easily. That afternoon, while Michael was out picking up groceries, I found the ticket again on the kitchen counter. Sunlight hit the numbers just right. Just check it, I told myself, so you can stop thinking about it. I opened the lottery app, typed in the numbers without much care, and waited for the screen to load. The first number matched. I frowned. The second matched too. My heartbeat picked up not with excitement, but with confusion. I refreshed the page, entered the numbers again. The screen didn't change. I sat down slowly, the chair scraping against the floor, my breath shallow. By the time Michael walked back in, grocery bags in his arms, I was still staring at my phone, silent, frozen, and completely unprepared for what I was about to say. Because the joke they'd given me at my wedding, it wasn't a joke anymore, and everything was about to change. Michael dropped the grocery bags the moment he saw my face. Emma? His voice sharpened with concern. What's wrong? I tried to speak. Nothing came out. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. I turned the phone toward him instead, the screen still glowing. The numbers still there, unchanged, undeniable. He stared. Once. Twice. Then he looked up at me, eyes wide. Is this real? I checked 3 times, I whispered. The app. The official site. I even compared the draw video. How much? He asked, though I already knew he'd seen it. 100 million. The words sounded fake in my own mouth, like lines from a movie I'd accidentally wandered into. I waited for the rush, joy, shock, something. Instead, what I felt was fear, cold, sharp, and immediate. Michael set the bags down slowly. Okay, he said after a moment. Okay. First thing, we don't tell anyone. I know, I said quickly, too quickly. The thought had already taken root in my mind. We don't tell my parents. Not Rachel. No one. He nodded. Especially not them. We stood there in the quiet kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly too loud. $100 million sat between us like a loaded question. What do we do? I asked. Michael didn't hesitate. We call a lawyer. Within an hour, I was sitting across from James Collins, a calm, silver-haired attorney whose office smelled faintly of old books and coffee. He listened without interrupting as I explained my wedding, the ticket, my family, the numbers on the screen that refused to change. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. First, he said evenly, you did the right thing by coming here. Second, do not say a word to your family. I let out a shaky breath. They already think they're entitled to everything about my life. He gave a small, knowing smile. Money doesn't create entitlement, it reveals it. He explained the process carefully, claiming anonymously, setting up a legal structure to protect my identity, securing the ticket, documenting every step. He talked about taxes, trusts, and security, not just financial, but personal. This kind of money changes how people behave, he said, especially family members who already believe they've earned a claim on you. I thought of my mother's text. You're strong. You always have been. Strong enough to carry their expectations. Strong enough to be ignored. Strong enough to be used. That night, I didn't sleep. My phone buzzed constantly on the nightstand. Messages from friends congratulating us on the wedding. A missed call from my mother I didn't remember seeing earlier. Then another. And another. I turned the phone face down. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to rush to explain myself. Over the next few days, I moved through my routine like a ghost. I answered emails. I smiled at neighbors. I nodded through conversations that suddenly felt distant and unreal. All the while, the ticket stayed locked in a small fireproof safe James had insisted I buy immediately. Every instinct I had screamed to tell someone, anyone, to share the weight of it, but I didn't. Because deep down, I knew something else too. This wasn't just about winning money. This was about control. About who got to decide my future. On the 4th day, the first real crack appeared. A message from my mother lit up my screen. Emma, do you still have that lottery ticket we gave you? I stared at the text for a long time. Then another message came in. From my father, call us when you can. It's important. My chest tightened, but my hands were steady as I typed a single response. Yes, I still have it. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, appeared again. Then, silence. 10 minutes later, my phone exploded, calls back to back, notifications stacking so fast the screen couldn't keep up. I watched the number climb as if from a distance. 12 missed calls, 27, 43. By midnight, there were 99 missed calls. From the people who couldn't stay for my wedding night. From the people who thought a $2 ticket was enough for me. I turned the phone off completely and sat in the dark beside Michael, my heart pounding not with panic, but with something new, clarity. They knew something had changed. They just didn't know how much. And when they finally did, I wouldn't be standing alone in a wedding dress, smiling through the hurt. This time, I would be standing on my own terms, protected, prepared, and ready. Because silence, I was learning, wasn't weakness. It was strategy. The days that followed felt unreal, like I was living someone else's life on mute. While my parents kept calling and texting, switching tones from concerned to confused to barely disguised urgency, I did exactly what James Collins told me to do. I stayed quiet. I documented everything. And I prepared. We set up a legal structure to claim the winnings anonymously. A trust, an LLC, layers of protection between my name and the money. James explained each step carefully, never rushing, never assuming I understood things I didn't. This isn't just about finances, he said during one meeting. It's about leverage, and right now, you have it. Leverage. The word felt strange in my mouth. For most of my life, I'd been the one accommodating, smoothing things over, giving in so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. The idea that I might finally have leverage, real leverage, was both empowering and terrifying. At home, Michael became my anchor. When my phone buzzed late at night, he'd reach over and squeeze my hand. "You don't owe them anything," he reminded me. "Not explanations, not access, not money." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. One afternoon, my mother left a voicemail that I couldn't ignore. "Emma," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "We're worried about you. You've been distant. This isn't like you. If something's going on, we deserve to know. We deserve to know. Not, 'Are you okay?' Not, 'Did we hurt you?' Just entitlement dressed up as concern." I deleted the message without responding. That same evening, James called me with an update. "Your claim is moving smoothly," he said. "But I want to ask, have your parents ever relied on you financially?" I hesitated. Not directly. But they've always assumed that if they needed help, I'd step in. He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. "Then you should be prepared for what comes next." "What's that?" "They'll frame this as a family matter," he said calmly. "They'll talk about love, loyalty, and sacrifice. They may even rewrite history to make you feel guilty." I swallowed. "And if they ask for money?" "They will," he said without hesitation. "The question is whether you're ready to say no." That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying my own reflection. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She looked older, not in years, but in awareness. I practiced the words quietly, testing how they felt. "I'm not comfortable with that. This decision goes through my lawyer." No. Each one felt heavy, unnatural, necessary. The next morning, Rachel finally reached out, not with a call but a long message. "I don't know what's going on, but Mom is freaking out. If you're upset about the wedding, we can talk. You know I'd never hurt you on purpose." I read it twice. Rachel had always been careful with her words. Never cruel enough to be obvious, never kind enough to change anything. She benefited from the system without ever questioning it. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to James, just like he'd instructed. "Good," he said. "Keep records. Every message matters." That's when it finally hit me, this wasn't just emotional anymore. It was legal. Whatever happened next wouldn't be decided by guilt trips or family dinners. It would be decided by documents, boundaries, and choices I made deliberately. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the years of being overlooked, something steady began to form. Resolve. Because I knew now that when my parents finally sat across from me, when the truth was no longer a rumor but a fact, I couldn't afford to hesitate. They had given me a $2 lottery ticket at my wedding, thinking it defined my worth. What they didn't understand was this. They had also given me time. Time to prepare. Time to protect myself. Time to decide who would and would not have a place in my future. And when the moment came, I would be ready to face them. Not as the daughter who always accepted less, but as a woman who finally chose herself. The first time we spoke after the wedding wasn't a confrontation. It was a test. My father called on a Tuesday afternoon, his name lighting up my screen like it always had. For a moment, muscle memory kicked in. I almost answered without thinking, almost slipped back into the role I'd played my whole life. I didn't. I let it go to voicemail. His message was calm, measured, almost warm. "Emma, sweetheart, just checking in. We heard there might be some confusion about that lottery ticket. Give us a call when you can." Confusion. As if this were a misunderstanding, not a sudden urgency sparked by the possibility of money. An hour later, my mother followed up with a text. "We're family. Let's not involve outsiders. We can talk this through." Outsiders. She meant lawyers. She meant boundaries. That evening, Rachel tried a different approach. She called Michael, I'm worried about Emma, she said, her voice soft, practiced. She's always been sensitive. If she's overwhelmed, we should support her. Together. Michael listened politely, then handed me the phone without a word. Rachel, I said, keeping my voice even. If you have something to say to me, say it to me. There was a pause. Then a sigh. I just think this whole thing is getting blown out of proportion, she said. It was a joke, Em. The ticket. You know how Mom is. A joke. On my wedding day. I know exactly how Mom is, I replied. That's the problem. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Rachel spoke again. So, did you check it? I didn't answer. Her breath hitched, just slightly. Enough for me to hear it. That was the moment I knew. They didn't care how I felt. They cared whether the ticket mattered. The next day, James called me into his office. His expression was serious but not alarmed. Your parents contacted me, he said. My stomach tightened. Already? They tried, he corrected. I declined to speak with them without your permission. I exhaled slowly. What did they want? He glanced down at his notes. They asked general questions. Hypotheticals. About what a responsible daughter might do in a situation like this. I let out a humorless laugh. Of course they did. James leaned forward. Emma, this is important. From this point on, everything changes. They're going to escalate. How? First comes reassurance, he said. Then guilt. Then pressure. And if that doesn't work, anger. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Longer this time. We didn't raise you to shut us out. If you're making decisions that affect the whole family, we deserve a say. Think about everything we've done for you. I read it once, then again. Everything they'd done for me. I thought about the wedding, the envelope, the empty seats at the reception table where my parents should have been. I think we should meet, I said quietly to James. He studied me. Are you sure? Yes, I replied. But not alone. And not without ground rules. A slow nod. That's the right instinct. We scheduled the meeting for the following week. Neutral location, James present, everything documented. That night, I told Michael about the plan. Are you okay? He asked. I considered the question carefully. No, I said honestly. But I'm ready. Ready to see them without hoping they'd change. Ready to hear what they really wanted. Ready to stop pretending this was about love when it was about control. As I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, a strange calm settled over me. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled me. Because now I understood something I'd never allowed myself to see before. My parents hadn't underestimated me. They had misunderstood me. They thought I would fold. They thought I would feel guilty. They thought I would hand over what they wanted just to keep the peace. What they didn't realize was that peace bought with silence had cost me enough already. And this time, when we finally sat across from each other, I wasn't going to play the part they'd written for me. The masks were slipping. And once they were off, there would be no putting them back on. The days leading up to the meeting stretched long and thin, like a held breath. My parents' messages became more frequent, more urgent. My mother alternated between affection and accusation. One moment it was, "We miss you so much." The next it was, "This distance is breaking our hearts." My father, on the other hand, stayed carefully neutral, short texts, clipped voicemails, always ending with the same line. We just want to talk like a family. But I'd learned something important over the past few weeks. When my parents said family, they meant compliance. James walked me through what to expect. Not emotionally, that part I had to face myself, but strategically. They'll try to control the narrative, he said. They'll frame you as emotional, impulsive. They may suggest you're being influenced by your husband, or by me. I smiled faintly. That's almost comforting. At least they're predictable. He returned the smile, but his eyes stayed serious. Emma, this meeting isn't about convincing them of anything. It's about protecting you. So we set terms. The meeting would take place in James's office. Michael would be there. Everything would be recorded. If voices were raised, if boundaries were crossed, we would end it immediately. And most importantly, I would not reveal everything at once. Not yet. On the morning of the meeting, I woke up before my alarm. I stood in the shower longer than usual, letting the water run hot over my shoulders, grounding myself in the sensation. For years, I'd walked into rooms with my parents already bracing, ready to explain, to apologize, to smooth things over before they even spoke. Today, I didn't feel that urge. Michael noticed it too. "You're calm," he said as we drove downtown. "I'm focused," I corrected. "There's a difference." When we arrived, James greeted us with a nod and ushered us into the conference room. The space was neutral, intentionally so, gray walls, glass table, no personal touches. A place where feelings didn't get to run the show. My parents arrived 10 minutes late. Together, as always. My mother's eyes scanned the room first, landing on Michael, then James, then finally me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Emma," she said, opening her arms as if for a hug. I stayed seated. She froze for half a second before lowering her arms and sitting down instead. My father cleared his throat. "This feels a bit formal." "That's intentional," James replied smoothly. "We're here to clarify expectations." My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "We don't need lawyers to talk to our own daughter." "You insisted on talking about money," James said. "That makes this legal." There it was, the shift. The air in the room changed, subtle but unmistakable. My mother turned to me. "Sweetheart, we're worried about you. You've been distant. This secrecy, this isn't healthy." "I'm not being secretive," I said evenly. "I'm being careful." "With us?" my father asked, genuinely surprised. "Yes," I answered. "With you." Rachel arrived a few minutes later, slipping into the empty chair beside my mother. She looked nervous, her usual confidence dulled by something close to fear. "Can we not do this like an interrogation?" she asked softly. "We're family." I looked at her, then really looked at her and felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not jealousy, disappointment. "This isn't an interrogation," I said. "It's a conversation you've avoided having for years." My mother scoffed lightly. "Oh, please. We've always been there for you." I tilted my head. "At my wedding?" Silence. "That was different," she said quickly. "Rachel had plans, you understand." I nodded slowly. "You're right. I understand now." My father leaned forward. "Emma, let's be practical. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of rumors. If that ticket turns out to be worth something, and I'm not saying it is, but if it is, we need to discuss what that means for the family." There it was. No pretense left. "What it means," I repeated. "For all of us," my mother added. "You didn't get here on your own. We raised you. We sacrificed." I felt Michael shift beside me, but I raised a hand gently. "I had this." "I'm not denying you raised me," I said. "I'm questioning what you think that entitles you to." "Any first." Rachel looked between us. "Emma, no one's trying to take anything from you." I met her eyes. "Then why are we here?" She didn't answer. James spoke next. "Let me be very clear. Any assets my client holds are hers alone. There is no legal obligation." "We're not talking about legal obligations," my mother snapped. "We're talking about morality." James didn't blink. "Morality doesn't override consent." My mother turned to me again, her voice dropping, becoming intimate, dangerous. "Don't let strangers turn you against your own family." I felt it then, the familiar pull, the old guilt, the urge to back down, to make things easier, but it passed. "I'm not against you," I said quietly. "I'm for myself." The room went still. My father stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Rachel's eyes filled with tears she didn't quite let fall. My mother's face hardened, the softness gone. "This isn't over," she said. I nodded. "I know." As they stood to leave, James leaned closer to me. "You did well," he murmured. "You didn't give them what they wanted." I watched my family walk out of the room confused, unsettled, no longer in control. For the first time, I realized something crucial. They thought this meeting was about access. They had no idea it was actually about exposure. And when the time came when the truth was no longer something they could manage with guilt or silence, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I would just let the facts speak. Because the trap wasn't confrontation. It was patience, and it was already closing in. The second meeting didn't happen by accident. It happened because my parents couldn't stand not knowing. 3 days after we walked out of James's office, my phone lit up again, this time with a message that dropped the pretense completely. Mom, we need to meet again. Tonight. All of us. No lawyers. I read it once, then handed the phone to Michael. They're panicking, he said quietly. They should be, I replied. I agreed to meet, but not on their terms. James would be there. Everything would be documented. And this time, I wouldn't hold anything back. We met in the same conference room. Same gray walls, same glass table. But the energy was different, tight, brittle, like a thread stretched too far. My parents arrived first. My mother paced. My father sat rigidly, hands clasped. Rachel came last, eyes red, mascara smudged like she'd been crying in the car. Can we just talk? My mother asked as soon as I sat down. Please, no games. I met her gaze. That depends on what you call games. She took a sharp breath. Are you going to tell us the truth or not? James glanced at me. I nodded. Yes, I said. I am. The room went silent. I opened the folder James had placed in front of me. Inside were copies, clean, organized, undeniable. The ticket was real, I began. I won. My father's face drained of color. How much? Rachel whispered. $100 million. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. Oh my God. I didn't pause. I didn't soften it. I kept going. I claimed it anonymously. I have legal protection in place. And no, before you ask, this money is not a family asset. My mother stood abruptly. After everything we've done for you, I'm not finished, I said, my voice steady. James slid another document forward. This, I continued, is a record of the messages you sent after you suspected the ticket had value. Notice the timing. Notice the shift. Rachel looked down at the pages, her hands trembling. And this, I added, turning another page, is the transcript of the voicemail you left the night after the wedding. My mother froze. James read aloud, calmly, professionally. If you're making decisions that affect the whole family, we deserve a say. I looked at my mother. You didn't ask how I was. You asked what I had. That's not fair, she snapped. You're twisting things. Am I? I asked. Because this, I tapped the table lightly, is the first time you've shown urgency about my life. My father finally spoke. Emma, listen. Families share. That's how it works. I leaned forward. Families also show up to their daughter's wedding. Silence crashed down between us. Rachel's voice broke. I didn't know it was that bad. I turned to her. You knew enough to accept the trip. She flinched. My mother rounded on James. You've poisoned her against us. He didn't react. No. I helped her articulate boundaries. Boundaries? My mother laughed bitterly. She wouldn't even exist without us. The words hung there ugly, unfiltered. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. You're right, I said quietly. You gave me life, but you don't own it. My father stood up. So what? You're just going to abandon us? I shook my head. No. I'm going to stop rescuing you from the consequences of your choices. Rachel started crying openly now. Emma, please. We can fix this. I looked at my sister, the golden child, the shield, the beneficiary of my silence for years. This was fixable, I said gently. Before you laughed, I closed the folder. Here's what's going to happen, I said. My finances are handled through my attorney. Any communication about money goes through him. Any attempt to pressure, guilt, or threaten me will end contact immediately. My mother's eyes burned. You think you're better than us now? I stood. No, I said. I think I finally see us clearly. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my mother's voice dropped, cold and sharp. You'll regret this. I met her stare. I already regretted years of staying quiet. I turned and walked out with Michael beside me. James a step behind. No shouting. No dramatic exit. Just the sound of the door closing. In the elevator, my legs finally started shaking. Michael took my hand. You okay? I exhaled slowly. I think that was the last time they had power over me. Outside, the city moved on, cars passing, people laughing, life continuing as if nothing monumental had just happened. But for me, everything had changed. Because in that room, I hadn't just revealed the truth. I'd chosen myself out loud, in front of everyone who had taught me not to. And once a truth is spoken like that, there's no putting it back. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was freedom. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in waves. The first wave was silence. No calls, no messages, no late-night voicemails heavy with guilt or accusation. For nearly 2 weeks after that meeting, my phone stayed quiet. I knew my parents were regrouping, reframing the story in their own minds, deciding who to blame now that I was no longer playing my part. Rachel was the first to break the silence. Her message was short. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much you carried for all of us." I read it 3 times. I didn't reply right away, because apologies mean different things depending on what follows them. Life, strangely enough, became calmer. Michael and I settled into a routine that finally felt like ours. I went back to work, not because I needed the paycheck, but because I loved what I did. I loved building things that lasted, spaces that felt safe, honest. Through James, I finalized everything. The money was secured, structured, protected. But more importantly, I was protected. For the first time, my future didn't hinge on anyone else's approval. My parents eventually reached out again separately this time. My father sent a brief message on my birthday. "Hope you're well. Love, Dad." I replied with the same simplicity. No bitterness, no promises. My mother called weeks later. She didn't apologize. She talked about how hard things had been, how unfair the world felt, how lonely she was now that Rachel had moved out. I listened. Then I said, calmly, "I'm sorry you're struggling, but I can't fix this for you." She hung up without saying goodbye, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to chase after her. Rachel and I met for coffee a month later. It was awkward, careful. 2 people relearning how to exist without an unspoken hierarchy between them. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, staring into her cup. "I just want to do better." "That's a start," I replied. We didn't hug, but we didn't leave angry either. That felt like progress. People often ask me if the money changed my life. The honest answer? Not in the way they think. The money gave me options. But the real change came from something else entirely. It came from realizing that love without respect isn't love, that family isn't defined by blood alone, but by behavior, and that choosing yourself isn't selfish when no one else ever chose you. At my wedding, my parents gave me a $2 lottery ticket and walked away. They thought it was a joke. They thought it was a dismissal. They thought it defined my worth. They were wrong. Because the real jackpot wasn't the money. It was the moment I stopped waiting for permission to matter. And once you claim that kind of freedom, no one can ever take it back.